Good morning, my friends. This is the Grim Tutor. Hope you're doing very well today, and welcome to another session of grading. We are grading the time-shifting process of the Time Spiral Remastered cards, and we are wondering, should the Gruul cards be graded on a curve? Not that it's specifically Gruul, but we're looking at red cards and green cards mostly, maybe a few black ones thrown in, right? Should these cards be graded on a curve? A very important question afflicting our society. I say no. I am going to remain objective and this totally subjective process, so obviously that makes sense, right? And we're gonna be ruthless but fair with our grade. So let's dive into it with a black card before we break into some new colors here, and this is good old Stinky, the most powerful dredge effect remaining legal in Modern, and this is definitely a very cool printing if you ask me. I'm going to give it an A-. I think the only reason it's probably not an A is because we have a question mark, a slight question mark over which art should have been used, which art suits the old border better. I think the art they chose is actually the correct one, but it is not by much. I think I like both imps here. I think they both suit the task very well. I think, if anything, the art they chose is a little bit more old feeling and therefore suits the old border better, specifically the use of colors here. The actual imp itself depicted in this original Ravnica printing on the right is something that we could have seen in older art, minus the use of colors, which to me feels a little bit more modern, but I do love it, and I do wonder what these misty purples and greens with this kind of witchy energy in the background, I do wonder what that would look like in the old frame. So with that in mind, I like both. I think this is a good choice, and I'm going to give it an A-, a solid start to today's grading. Next up is Goblin Engineer. Now, this is the only art Goblin Engineer is a card created for and released in Modern Horizons. And personally, even though I don't play goblins, and nor do I play any Goblin Engineer decks, I like this a lot. I think we should have as many old-bordered goblins as possible. Goblins as a tribe, or just as a creature type, to me, are very, very representative of Magic as a whole. And I know that Magic the Gathering has never been bound to simply the traditional high fantasy races as depicted in Tolkien, for example, and as time has gone on, that has become even more true. Nevertheless, those are good thematic touchstones for people in terms of helping them recognize things as they're new to the game, or for people who are veterans of the game to refer back to. I love when goblins have a presence in the meta. I love when elves have a presence in the meta, etc., etc. So with all that in mind, this Goblin Engineer time shifting is a great choice. I like the scene depicted here. It's very in keeping with the card and with the creature type. As far as the art's execution, it's okay. I don't have any major qualms with it, but it's also just not my favorite for reasons that maybe are a little bit harsh, but basically it just doesn't reach the heights of certain other goblins, whether it be the heights of zaniness or the heights of peak goblin execution as depicted in this realm. So for me, that's the only thing stopping it from an A. I'll give it an A-. And next up is Anger of the Gods, and this one, my friends, is hype. I should mention, before we talk about it specifically, that my own personal mathematical equation of old border equals good, new border equals bad, is most evident. It is best exemplified in the color red. To me, the coolness gap between the old and new is widest in the color red, so I should mention that just for full disclosure. But what do we think about Anger specifically? Well, I really like it right off the bat. We're using the original Theros version to time shift, but there are other versions in case you didn't know. Both are relatively recent additions. This one, I guess, is Amonkhet Remastered or something, appears to be online only. This one is not for me. It just feels way too digitized. There is not any kind of visceral feel that you get looking at this that you would looking at what's depicted in the original Theros art. This feels apocalyptic, right? This one, even though a lot of it's well executed, I really like the sky. The overall feel just way too sterile and computerized for me, so not going to use that one. But we also have a secret layer version, the Yargle version, and Again, this one's not really for me, but I do understand the appeal. Eating those clerics might have been a bad idea. Yeah, sometimes you learn these things a little bit too late, Yargle. But the Theros, the clear winner for me. There's something almost medieval about this art. Maybe it's the way the figure is crouching, nearly nude, kind of crouching in shadow as hellfire rains down. Very medieval vibe to this Noah Bradley piece, and one that very much does suit the old border. So I'm going to give this one an A. I think it is a very good choice and very well executed with the correct art chosen. Dreadhorde Arcanist is next, and as this card is stronger and stronger the older the format gets, basically, or, it's also strong in some newer formats too, so maybe it's just another one of those where specifically Modern is a little bit too powerful, but also not quite powerful enough for it to shine. The card itself doesn't inherently outclass other cards, and also the supporting cast for the card, not quite there. But with that in mind, as I say, it sees play in formats older than Modern, therefore I completely support the decision to time shift it. Now, this is a relatively new card. We don't have alternative art for it, so this was the only art. And some people in my Discord, I have to agree, say that maybe this could have used a new art. It's not bad art. I don't really dislike the art in a vacuum, but it does absolutely feel more suited to the new frame in my view. Now, the old frame carries a lot of weight here, pulls a lot of weight, does a lot of work inherently. Again, I love the red old frame, I kind of hate the red new frame, and specifically the white text is kind of giving this some balance, the white text in the name and in the type line for Zumbi Mago here. And, all that being said, maybe, just maybe, a missed opportunity for some new art that really suits the old border, and also maybe suits, gives a different take on Arcanist. Like, we've seen so many cards here, whenever there's hotly contested, which art is best discussions, usually you have a wide variety of takes on the creature itself. In this case, maybe a missed opportunity, so for that, we have to give only a B+, but nevertheless a wise decision to print this, and maybe we'll get a different art at some point, but will it ever be time shifted? Yeah, not sure. Next we have Alesha, who smiles at death. Now, I could have sworn there was another version of this card somewhere. Hopefully Scryfall's not letting me down, but in any case, this is the only art I'm finding. It is good art. It is art that I think suits both frames pretty well, and Alesha is a card that sees play in Commander, sees play in casual formats, and when I was new to Modern and I was brewing 3 and 4 color human decks before they really became a thing with Ixalan block, I actually experimented with this card as a 1 of 2, so not much more to say about it. I think it's a fine choice. We're going to go ahead and give Alesha an A-, seems about right. And we've got Swifty and Old Border. Now that's right, Monastery Swiftspear receiving the time-shifted treatment, and my friends, that is so very exciting, because can you now name a more iconic Modern duo than Judgment Old Border Lava Dart, alongside Time-shifted Old Border, Monastery, Swiftspear? You might be able to name a few, but there is some stiff competition here for the most iconic duo, and I have to say that I have always really liked Swiftspear the card. I like the background, the setting, very, very much. I like the figure in the foreground quite a bit, and the flow of the movement as depicted here that she's executing, it's all very appealing, right? Now, one of my big bones of contention with the new red frames in general is that cards that are too red in their art, where red is the overwhelming color and it's the traditional, fire everywhere type thing, it becomes too much. It just sets my teeth on edge. It raises my hackles. I don't know how to describe it. It is an instinctive reaction. Whereas the old border treats that much better. The old border does not feel washed out or overloaded with red when that happens. Now, what we're looking at here is Swifty, of course, is not the case. You get more of a cool feeling from this piece. You get the feeling that, she's up high in the highlands somewhere in a cooler or perhaps very cold mountainous region, or maybe a windswept cold coast. It's kind of hard to say, but there's a lot of purples going on here too. It's not overloaded with red, as we say. Therefore, I have always really, really liked this card in the new frame. So is the old frame really that much of an upgrade? Yes. Number one, alongside the decks it's going to play in, it's going to look very, very good. And even in a vacuum, just look at it. It's incredible. If the new frame suited the art this well, the old frame is going to be even better. We don't lose here, we gain, even though the bar was already pretty high for this card. And we also, for the sake of completion, have to note the Secret Lair piece. Now, when I first saw these Valentine's Day themed Secret Lair ones, especially the Swifty, I was like, what am I looking at here? This is strange. But you know what? This actually has grown on me, and I could see it being actually pretty appealing to, chip in, turn this specific printing sideways, and grow it sometimes to a 4-5 or something absurd. It's so cute. It's so harmless, or is it, right? And so, the more I look at it, the more I get used to it, the more I actually like this printing too. But for me, it will always be the original and obviously the old border. So I have to give this one an A. It probably would be an A+ if it didn't already suit the new frame so well, and or if it was the only reasonable art to use. But yeah, a solid A for me. Very excited about this one. Back to black for a moment, my friends, with Liliana's Triumph. Now, this War of the Spark printing, I'll be honest, it is not my favorite. The art is not my favorite. That said, I like the card Liliana's Triumph a lot. It is definitely overlooked, underrated, underplayed in my view. I love the design, and Liliana of the Veil herself, whom it references and of course synergizes with, is among my very favorite cards all time and an absolute cornerstone of Modern. Now, unfortunately, Liliana of the Veil is not getting the old border treatment. No Planeswalkers are, I believe, and that is a shame, because Lily of the Veil Time-Shifted would be just about at the very top of my wish list. Now, since we're not getting that, and since neither Liliana of the Veil nor any other Lilianas that are iconic BGX cards and also synergize with Liliana's Triumph, none of them are old bordered. So to time shift Liliana's Triumph, it doesn't really go with anything, And it's not even really an old-fashioned feeling card in terms of its design. It's designed because, again, it references the new Lilianas, the post-modern Lilianas, anyway, as far as the frame. And, if we think of an old-fashioned edict, well, they all target. This specifically is designed to be useful in a way that those old edicts are not, against Leyline of Sanctity in particular. So, all that said, I don't really know how much I like the idea to specifically time shift this card, and as I said, this art does not thrill me. I don't really... I think the cutting Liliana's face off, in half, basically, as far as the framing is concerned, I get the idea, but the execution is not really doing it. Her face look just ends up looking a little silly to me, or perhaps more like she's trying too hard to be the Liliana of the Veil that we all know and love, whereas Lily of the Veil in the original printing, she is effortlessly herself, charismatic, inviting, forbidding in a way. Definitely, that's the type of energy we need to be aiming for. Now, there is another Liliana's Triumph as well, and I actually really like this printing, which is another reason I don't think this needed to be time-shifted. The full art, the framing's really, really cool. I like the art here a lot. At the same time, I don't know if it would suit the old frame, although I would like to see it to decide for sure. But this art, although I do like it, it feels very new. It feels very new. So ultimately, I have to give this one like a C+, because despite my professed overarching love for the old black border, I don't think this is better than the extended art promo from War of the Spark to me, and I also don't really think the idea to time shift Triumph is one I'm that thrilled about. So yeah, unfortunately, a C+ is where we settle here. Another black card next in the form of Grey Merchant of Asphadol, and unlike Liliana's Triumph, I fully support the decision to time shift this card, not necessarily because it feels like an old card in the sense of the pre-modern framing, but more just because Gary is a beloved figure, a meme figure, and somebody to be respected, of course, in the world of Magic the Gathering. And you've got the original printing that's been time-shifted. Again, this art really is the Grey Merchant. This art really is Gary. I think it would be a little weird if they didn't time-shift this art. That said, remember, there is a newer promo art that actually I do like. You know, the more just glancing at it, taking it in at a glance, the old Gary is what's familiar. The old Gary is what is a touchstone for people who have maybe played like Mono Black Devotion in past standard formats or even in modern. And this new one, it is not so much better at a glance as to displace the old one's role in people's memories. That said, I think this new one's underrated. I think it's actually pretty cool. Nevertheless, time-shifting the old one, probably correct. I'm going to give this one an A-. I think Gary is a welcome addition to the time-shifted ranks. Back to red with Kiki-jiki Mirror Breaker, and remember what I said about as many old bordered goblins as possible. Well, we have another one, Kiki-jiki, the legendary Goblin Shaman, and there is another art which is okay. This is an example of too much red, however, in the modern frame, so I think while I do like it, I like the actual figure here of Kiki-jiki quite a lot. He's up to something, that much we can tell. And, I like it fine. I like it fine, but overall, it's too much for me. It's too bright, it's too red, it's too fiery. I do prefer the character and the texture of the Kamigawa block version, and I also think it is by far the correct version to time shift, although this old red border would kind of also improve the alternative version, right? But this one's the correct one to choose, and I'm going to give this one an A. I think this is a fabulous candidate for time shifting. Big fan. Next is Felden of the Third Path, and this is a fabulous decision. Oh my goodness, I absolutely love this one, and I don't and will never play the card. It's a commander-only card. I am, at best, a very, very casual commander player, and I would probably never play a Felden deck, so there is no inherent dog in this fight for me. However, there is some continuity here, some thematic continuity that we've seen similar things. Felden's Cane, classic mill-hate from Antiquities, was time-shifted in the original time-shifting process back with the first Time Spiral run, and Felden of the Third Path following close after his Cane here, I guess. And if you could name an art that we've seen today in this video so far that is more improved, I would be surprised, right? Thus far in the video, I think the art from Felden of the Third Path, which is good, which I like, in the new frame, just becomes breathtaking, just becomes so welcoming and so perfect in the old frame. And again, as always, I make the caveat, these are blurry. They're going to look way better once we have higher resolution, less blurry images when they've been out for longer, right? But this one, my friends, a straight up A+. Felden of the Third Path, big winner today. But then we come to the lowest grade I've given yet in this series. This is a D. This is a straight up D. I'm tempted to give an F, but I've consulted with the Ape Defense Squad representatives, and they said, we need to remain objective, we need to remain fair if we want to continue pursuing our case to free the unjustly imprisoned Simian Spirit Guide. So we're going to, present our case, and it concludes with a D. So, officially, stamp of approval from the Ape Defense Squad. This is a D. And this is a D because they're trolling us. They ban Simian Spirit Guide in Modern. They kill Ad Nauseam as we knew it. They nerf Mono Red Prison, all the rest. And as I said at the time, I would only have been really upset, this is of course half of a meme, if they had left the fire cards alone and banned the fast mana, right? Since they banned it all, basically, I'm okay, but still, this is a troll, this is going to be a D, and it's also a D because it's not old border, and the planar chaos version of Simian Spirit Guide is absolutely just like the version to use if you ask me. However, I do refrain from giving it an F in part because it does show the Simian Guide in a better place, you know? It definitely, you know, the sacrifice has been honored in some way here, even though it's kind of a backhanded way to honor it by reprinting it with new art, new heavenly art after banning it. Oh, I'm still not over it. And, you know, another thing boosting it up is the flavor text. It's rarely worth questioning where the mana comes from. Just be grateful, from good old Jaya Ballard. So yeah, still have to give it a D though because I'm salty. There you go. Lava Spike gets an A, no doubt. I absolutely love the Kamigawa block art. This is a great example of that style that was brought to bear in that block, which I was a big fan of. It's also an example of a red card, especially a red burn card, benefiting from depicting a cold climate. I really like those types of cards. Lava Spike is no exception. And if I liked it before, well, now I absolutely adore it in the old frame, no doubt about it. Now, there is another alternative art Lava Spike. It is from UMA, and I don't actually really want to bag on this one. I think this one's actually pretty cool. It's a bold divergence from the original art, and I think that's warranted because, you know, this more understated, you know, almost more like 90s D&D feel of the Kamigawa block art. Definitely not going to appeal to everybody, although it does appeal to me. So I like the new Lava Spike too, and I respect the choice to use it, but I personally never would. It's just a little bit too on the nose, and this old one is just more charming. So this one gets a solid A, my friends. Solid A for Lava Spike. And that's right, they've time-shifted Bedlam Reveler to this batch of red cards is completely insane. I absolutely love it. And if this was a live stream, if I was just reacting as they came out, I would probably give this one an A+, because I love Bedlam Reveler and Mono Red prowess, and I think the decision to time-shift it is magnificent. That said, upon more sober reflection, I actually have to lower the grade 2 notches. I'm going to give it an A-, which is still very good, of course. But here's the thing. The art for Bedlam Reveler, I like a lot about it. There's major Lord of the Rings energy with the scene that's depicted. You know, they're fleeing the Balrog. You know the scene I'm talking about. But, you know, you look a little bit more closely, and it's just not quite there in the top tier of Magic art. The detailing is what's lacking to me. The detailing on the devil's flesh, the detailing maybe on some of the background stuff, the currents of lava. It's just like a good but not fantastic piece of art in my opinion. And the fact that, you know, it does look a little bit computerized in those ways and the lack of detailing as well, it all feels a little bit too modern to be a slam dunk fit in the old borders. So, that said, I have to leave it at an A-. If I was just following my heart, maybe it'd be a little higher. Objectively, I think that's about where it is. So still a great one, but could we have done a little bit better with the art? Could we maybe have even considered some new, more old-fashioned art? I would say yes. Next up is Atali Primal Storm, who is a legendary elder dinosaur. Now, my friends, I like elves and goblins. I like angels and demons. I like undead and wizards. I'm not one of those people who loves Ixalan block for the heckin' dinosaur, I just dinosaurs. No, couldn't be me, right? I think it is kinda goofy, if I'm being honest. However, the old border makes everything better, and Atali actually looks completely incredible in the old border. It looks more like a dragon, right? Looks more like a dragon in the old border, and dragons are epic. So, even though I have no interest in this card in general, and I will probably never play it for any reason in my Magic career, I'm going to give it an A. The improvement here is absolutely huge. Next is Past in Flames, and in this case, we have a little bit to talk about. So, the original Innistrad printing is not my absolute favorite. It is an example of too much red on a modern red card, but I don't know if it's just the way this scan has come through or whatever. I maybe need to see it on the MTGO client itself, or of course ideally in paper, to decide. So I make a caveat with this, but this is actually a counterexample. You know, I say a lot of the cards that are too red for my tastes are improved by the old border. I don't know if this one is. Now, this looks like a different color than the other old border red cards we've seen. So again, maybe something going a little bit awry here. I reserve judgment but for now, I actually don't love it. I actually don't love the decision to time shift this card in general. It feels like a card that is absolutely just like a part of Modern Storm and not that much else. And Modern Storm is not a card I associate almost at all with old borders. And in general, this Innistrad art, not my very favorite. But is it the best suited to the task? We have two other ones. There is also the signature spellbook Chandra version, I believe, of Past in Flames. And this one is very, very new feeling. I am tempted to just reflexively say that it wouldn't suit the old border as well, but now that I'm looking at it again, I would be interested to see it, and I think it's a fascinating piece of art. I'm actually a big fan of it. And then we have the Modern Masters from Anna Steinbauer. Now this one is my absolute favorite. I think it is. I like, frankly, both versions a lot better than the original Innistrad version. This would probably be my number one candidate to put in the old frame, but I would have to see it. So ultimately, I'm going to give this Past in Flames a C-. I'm going to give it a pretty low grade. I think number one, I don't love the art inherently. Number two, I don't really agree with the decision to time shift Past in Flames over how many other cards they could have done. And number three, I think there's a good argument that both of the other ones they didn't use were better candidates for time shifting. So C-, and that might be being a little generous, but maybe we reserve D's only for when they troll us with Simian Guide, right? Vandalblast from Seb McKinnon, who is a much beloved artist, and this is an example of a very decent to good piece, some would even rate it more highly, that is just made that little bit worse because it is very busy, there is a lot going on, and I think the new frame just makes that all a little bit too busy, and when you slot this into the old frame, it becomes amazing. The old frame is not distracting from all of the things that are going on here in the art. So Vandalblast, I think this is a fabulous example of how time shifting can make a card so much more appealing. This one gets a straight up A, no question about it, very easy A. Temur Battle Rage is also at least an A, my friends. This is a great card to time shift. Looking at it now, I want to give it an A+. Should I give it an A+? Maybe. But, it's the same exact art. There's only one art. You have the original Fate Reforged printing. There is also a full art promo, which is pretty cool. But to me, the full art promos, they do not have as much luster or as much charm as the old bordered, especially if it's like an instant. I can see it a little bit more if it's a permanent that sits on the battlefield, but for an instant, for like something that you play and then the game is usually over after you play it, or either way, it's just there and then it's in the graveyard. I don't love the full art as much, so I'm a big fan of the time-shifting decision here. I think I mentioned in the Gurmag Angler review in the previous video that Grixis Death Shadow, where TBR of course fits most at home, is a legacy deck in Modern. Basically, that's how people have talked about it for a while. Therefore, it makes a lot of sense to time shift those cards, really adding to the older feel. Finally, the art here is supplemented, I think, greatly. Although it looks great in the new frame, it's supplemented greatly by the old frame. Again, the white text with that solid red background pulling a lot of weight here. So yeah, let's go for it. Let's give this one an A+. I'm very, very satisfied with how this looks. Really hyped about it, too. Next, we have Zealous Conscripts, which is an A for me, my friends. This is an example of art that is appealing in theme, is appealing in some ways in execution, and ultimately to the extent that it's not like in the very top tier, it's because the proportions are a little bit off, maybe a little bit of a cartoonish feel, detracting from the reality of things when, you look at the proportions of the figures and maybe indeed of the gigantic sword that this woman is wielding, who leads the conscripts. All of that just feels like it fits better in the old border when that was maybe a little bit more common to see these types of appealing, depictions that are maybe just, again, the proportions might be a little bit off, something like that, keeping it from the type of hyper-realism that we see more commonly later on. So I'm going to give this one an A. I think, it's a very fine upgrade. Maybe it could come down to an A- just because I don't know exactly how necessary it was to time shift zealous conscripts, but yeah, something like that. Molten Rain has also been time shifted, and this is a pretty cool card, I think. Largely been displaced for the purposes of mid-range players, if you want this type of effect, by Pillage, if you want the closest correlate, but I think on average the ability to shatter something is more relevant to Jund or to Rakdos than the deal 2, right? So Molten Rain, fitting maybe more as land hate for burn or prowess sometimes, something like that. Right? So with that in mind, how do we rate this? Well, I actually rate it pretty highly because I've registered a Molten Rain or two in my day, and, playing those red decks, and I've always, wondered a little bit about which art I like better, because the Mirrodin one, it's the original printing, there's some stuff that's cool about it, and it feels older, and that's the main reason I like it, is it feels older, and overall a good printing, but I'm actually very favorably disposed to this Modern Masters printing as well. I like the smoke kind of billowing everywhere, taking over the sky, plunging it into darkness. I do like that vibe, and I think the building depicted here is very, very appealing too. I'm a huge fan of this printing in a vacuum, so even though I generally tend toward things with older school vibes, I was probably ready to make an exception for Molten Rain. Therefore, the decision to take the original Mirrodin printing and time shifted, I think, is a very good one. I would like to see what this Modern Masters one looks like in the old frame as well. I think they'd both be good, but nevertheless, a good solid choice, A- here for me. Next, we have Exquisite Firecraft. I've always found this card delightful. Like seeing it as a one-of in a burn sideboard, for example, there's just something very delightful and appealing about that to me. And, the art has never really stood out to me. This is a classic example of taking art that maybe for one reason or another never really caught my eye, and putting it in an old frame, and suddenly, this art is incredible. This art is really unique and really, really cool. There is another alternate art Exquisite Firecraft online, only this is it. There's some cool stuff going on here, but ultimately, for me, this is the type of in-your-face, over-the-top burn spell art that just, especially in a new frame, does nothing for me conceptually, doesn't really appeal to what I like in Magic art. So this is the Exquisite Firecraft art I would use, and I think time-shifting it is incredible. It's a great execution, a decent idea. I'm giving it an A. Another A here for Young Pyromancer, about whose art I have never quite known how to feel, and about whose place in Modern I have also never quite known how to feel. Nevertheless, in older formats and, in certain periods of Modern, especially the Faithless Looting era, young PZ was definitely a force to be reckoned with, and still is, again, in some formats. And I think the decision, therefore, to time shift this card, who has often in the past been mentioned in the cycle of, the best 2-drop ever printed in every color, stuff like that, this guy deserves to be time shifted, my friends, and there's only one art, so perhaps was there a little bit of scope to create some new art? I would probably say yes, because again, I remain a little bit unsure about how to rate the art overall, but the art is very much, what's a synonym for iconic? I keep using the word iconic. The art is very iconic, and also suits the old border to a T. We didn't really have other options besides a Chandra spellbook option with the same art, so all things considered that I just listed, Young Pyromancer taking home the A. Elvish Mystic is next, my friends, and this is an A+ without any shadow of a doubt. We have two options to have time shifted with Elvish Mystic. The first one is the original one. That's the one that got time shifted, is from M14. And I have long admired and loved this M14 art, but it always had the caveat of not being old. You know, you can play any number of very old, or indeed very new if you prefer, Llanowar elf printings, for example. And if you're in a format where Findhorn Elves is legal, obviously you've got some very special printings for that too. One dating back to Ice Age, and then some really cool newer promos. Whatever you want to do, you can do it. With Elvish Mystic, either way, you're doing something relatively new. There is a pretty cool new promo, alternative art promo. Ultimately, I just don't like the art as much as the original M14 art. I think it's good. I think it's fine, and I think with elves you have a very high bar to clear, so keep that in mind. This is still way cooler than most Magic cards in general to me, but ultimately it's like, do you want to play the promo with art that's a little less desirable to me? You want to play a basic M14? What are we doing here? Now, my friends, you don't have to choose. You just have to play this time-shifted Elvish Mystic. This is a 10 out of 10. This is a 12 out of 10 for 12 mana dorks, you know, if you're playing a format that allows for that. And wow. I just have no other words. A+ all day for the time-shifted Mystic. And next up, we gotta talk about that Tarmogoyf. Now, it is very cool that they did reprint the Goyf, and it is interesting that they used the Future Sight art heretofore available only in the Future Sight frame for a, unfortunately, non-old bordered Time Spiral, just regular reprint. But because this is a BGX above all channel, we gotta talk about it anyway. So, to me, this just shows that the art, while it is definitely, it's good insofar as it is a little bit disturbing. It leaves somewhat to the imagination. This really, really benefits in as many ways carried by the Future Sight frame. I'm not even certain that a traditional old green frame would benefit this as much as the Future Sight frame does. And of course, there are other Tarmogoyf printings as well. When I was new to BGX, I almost felt a little bit self-conscious about my thinking that while I love the Future Sight frame, and while that is extremely representative of Tarmogoyf, given how unusual the card is, how much of a modern staple it is, and the indelible association of that frame with the card, I almost felt a little bit self-conscious about saying, I actually like the Modern Masters art the best. Now, as time has gone on, I've come into my own, and I think this is a very respectable decision. I actually still hold it, although I have switched to Future Sight copies on MTGO. This is actually still my favorite art. The overall effect of the Future Sight frame, though, is very, very strong. I like them about the same. Right? I like them about the same, but the Modern Masters art is killer. It is completely awesome. And then we also have the UMA. It's a box topper, and that's cool. There are, to me, a surprising amount of people that love this art. It is their favorite. To me, this is the clear, distant third. It is not for me. It is just not my style. And it's cool that they did also incorporate the theme of the Modern Masters art into this one. Just a very, very different take on the Goyf itself. Not for me. So to that end, I'm happy that they reprinted Tarmogoyf. Maybe that makes it a little bit more affordable for people looking to get into Rock or Jund. Otherwise, I'm not thrilled by this one, guys. I think it is a big missed opportunity. Maybe there's some reason I'm not quite aware of as to why they didn't do anything else with this, but the packaging seems to indicate that Tarmogoyf was getting new art that actually looked pretty cool. I have no idea why we're looking at this old art in a frame that doesn't suit it as well. Maybe there's still more to come. Maybe I'm missing something. I've been super, super busy lately. I'm just recording these in like my only free time, and it's kind of off-the-cuff thinking. Not really able to do my research to figure this stuff out. So those are just my thoughts. Cool that it's being reprinted, but I actually have to give this a pretty low grade of a C. And next up is Beast Whisperer. I gotta give this one an A. You know, this is a card that, just at a glance, never quite hit it out of the park for me, but if you actually just kind of force yourself to take a minute and look, there's actually a lot to love here. A lot going on in this art. The background is just beautiful. There's a lot of detail. There's so much going on. There's so much, you're seeing so many different things, but it does not feel busy. It still provides that kind of autumnal woodland tranquility. It does transfer it to you, the card owner. So with that in mind, it's one of those that, as I say, maybe has a little bit more to it than at first glance, and maybe other people have liked it better than me at first glance as well. But then when you put it in the old frame, everything I just said becomes more true. It is even better representative of that autumnal woodland feel, and the busyness that, is well contained but does exist, maybe exacerbated a little bit by the new frame, is, rendered softer, rendered calmer by that old green frame. And in general, we've got another old bordered elf, and one that is playable in a lot of formats that do play elves. So there we go, Beast Whisperer taking home an A. Happy to see it. Next up, we've got Eternal Witness, and there's a few things to talk about here. This is going to be the last card I'm covering today. This came out kind of in a batch with a few others. I'm going to, this video has gone on quite long enough. I'm going to save more green cards for the next video and call it good after this. But let's end on a high note with Eternal Witness. A few things to discuss. First of all, the style of art that has been transformed, time shifted, that's the word I'm looking for, has been the UMA art from Chris Ron, which there's a lot I like about it, and I don't know if I like it the best in a vacuum, and I also don't think it suits the old border the best. So let's look at the other ones. The original printing is Therese Nielsen's Fifth Dawn printing, right? That's Fifth Dawn, and that is definitely the one that comes to my mind when I think of Eternal Witness, and also I think this would be just such a slam dunk fit in the old border. Now, in terms of the decision to time shift the card Eternal Witness itself, I think it's a great one, but I think we might have missed a trick here by not incorporating Therese Nielsen's original art. This one is my favorite. I also think it suits the old border the best. We also have another one by the same artist, a kind of spin-off of her own work by Nielsen in the DCI promo, and it's cool that an FNM promo for this card exists. I don't think this one is as well done. It is not as appealing to me, and it's also not particularly different from her own original. I wouldn't have used this one. The one thing you can say for Chris Ron, no matter how you perceive it, it is very, very different from the Therese Nielsen original. I think my favorite thing, I do like most things about the Ron art. I love the wolf made of leaves and mystical energy, right? Being basically reanimated by the witness. There's so much to like. It just feels a little bit newer. I think that the whole vibe clashes a little bit with the old frame, despite me really liking the card. Finally, there is a secret layer printing. Now, they're definitely not going to just time shift these really unorthodox secret layer art, so this is kind of a moot point. I'm just mentioning it for the sake of completion. I also would never play this secret layer Eternal Witness in a BGX deck, for example, but it is pretty cool. It is a bold decision to make art like this, and in certain other shells, shells maybe involving blue or white, I could see actually playing this and being pretty pumped about it. It is definitely a unique one, but for me, it is either the Chris Ron UMA or the Therese Nielsen original, and my preference would be for the original. I understand a lot of the benefits of the Ron one, and ultimately I'm happy to see Eternal Witness here. So my only regret is that I think this original would look so good in the old frame. It is a huge missed opportunity. I can't go higher than a B because of that, but ultimately pretty happy to see this card, and there we go with another grading session. We covered the Gruul pool, if you will, or maybe the Jund pool, because it was a little bit of green, a little bit of residual black, and the big bulk, maybe all, in fact, of the red cards. I don't exactly know, not keeping count. So thank you so much for watching, my friends. Thank you for being a patrician and not a plebeian, and indulging me in these art conversations. It's all kinds of fun. I can make them quick with no preparation and no effort, basically. No stress. It's just some fun content while I have very, very busy days going on. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you for the next one.